Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Fixed. So this is Gendy Tarkovsky's big R-rated animated sex comedy. It is a film he's wanted to make for a long time, and it is the most dog balls I've seen in a movie in my entire life. Definitely. I've seen every John Waters movie, never had as many dog balls in my face as this movie. Look, we all like Gendy Tarkovsky. But there's a point with auteurism, where you're like following a director and you're noticing the things that they do a lot and you like them and you're like, I'm going to keep following this person. And you expect everything to be great. And the kind of fault in auteurism is a movie like Fixed. No, I think part of the reason I don't like this movie is Gendy's animation is not really up to par. He's very gifted. I'd say it's pretty close to decent with him, and there's certain gags. But man, I'm not a big sex comedy guy, and this does not change my mind on that. It wasn't too gross, because God knows I've reviewed way worse, and that part didn't honestly bother me. I was surprised the amount of dog balls. That surprised me. Was I grossed out by them? No. Was I surprised by the quantity of dog balls? Yes. But this movie is about a dog who is in love with another dog, Honey. This dog is both voiced by Adam Devine. Honey's voiced by Catherine Hahn, who was in Gendy's last animated movie, the last one, so Hotel Transylvania 3. And he learns he's going to be neutered because he's humping grandma's leg too much. That's like a plot point. And so he wants to go out on the town one last time while he still has his balls and I guess have sex and stuff with his buddies. They go to various places, a dog sex club, all sorts of weird stuff like that, while he tries to find his true love. Like I said, not a big sex comedy guy. I was the right age for American Pie. Didn't like it even then. Look, I watched a lot of John Waters movies before American Pie came out. Should I have been doing that? No. But did I have better taste than watching American Pie movie at the time? Yes. So there's that, I guess. Again, it's not necessarily gross, but I do think Gendy is much more of an action guy. Even though he's very good at comedy. I really like Hotel Transylvania 3 in particular. I like all his movies, all the first three at least, as my kids will make me watch them all around Halloween in the fall a lot of times. But it's also like, what we like him for is like, Dexter's Lab was very funny. Powerpuff Girls, when he directed that, could be very funny. But also, Primal, Samurai Jack, Unicorn Warriors Eternal. I am more of an apologist for him most of the time. But most of the time, they're good and they understand their genre and understand what the thing he's making. And I'd say this film, structure-wise and how it's all laid out, is very much a sex comedy. But it doesn't do anything with that format. It doesn't go, wow, I always wanted a sex comedy to be about dogs. Never wanted that at all. And I get this is about him and his friends and I guess stuff he did before he got his balls removed or something. I'm not exactly sure how this metaphor works, but supposedly it is based on his friends and stuff like that. But I just don't look at this movie. It's just not really that great. I think this whole sex comedy genre isn't a great genre because if you're really on a crazy sex drunken night with your buddies, you're not also going what about true love, and you're like, what the fuck is it? I think that worked better in Superbad and all the others. It's just I don't know. It's at least this movie didn't get super rapey or something, which I think a lot of these things do, but this is just I just don't really like this genre. I don't think it's a really making a statement on men and women. I just think it's kind of gross most of the time. I don't know. I never, I've definitely gotten drunk with buddies before. I've never done any of this stuff, so maybe I can't relate, but I don't think it's that gross. I think if you think it's that gross, you need to watch more gross movies, and that's a you problem. But I don't think this was really as well done as some of his other comedy, which is more Looney Tunes and stuff like that. I don't think this story leaned as into his strengths as an animator. This is far more dialogue based, and he's an animator. He's much more good at, he can do dialogue, but I think it works better when he can visually show you stuff. And they don't do that as much. And the kind of like sex stuff, I thought, there's certain scenes that I thought were kind of funny. There's like a scene towards the end that I was like, oh my god, what am I seeing? Which was kind of hilarious, but I mean, the main part that everyone likes is the little teacup dog quick sequence. That's probably the best this movie gets. All the sex stuff comes off more like kind of just like virginal and almost. I do think the problem with R-rated or X-rated animated films is it feels like they're overcompensating to such a degree that you're like it just goes too far. Like I wish they'd like tone it down in some of these. I get like how people view animation and stuff. It's very rare to have these kind of films even now, but it just gets to be a bit much how much they're really pushing the envelope sometimes. I'm just like, okay, I guess, but like it really always just feels like overcompensating. It is interesting to see a big auteur sex comedy, but I just think like if you're gonna do anything with this genre and have it be with dogs, like do something different with it, which I definitely saw him do in like Dexter's Lab and other places. It just feels like this is the genre but with dogs, but there's no twist other than the balls are getting moved. It feels like it was just any of those sex comedies I've seen before without really understanding what it was or what it's doing. It's just kind of accepting it at face value and just putting dogs in it. And that's just not very interesting. I think you can do a lot with this genre and maybe bring in the fact that like it's silly or like how ridiculous it is or anything like that. And I don't think it really, I mean, it does have dogs doing that to like 50 Cent songs and stuff. And I sort of see it, but it just doesn't fully get into it. And I do think that's sort of kind of the problem with this is like the animation is not as visually interesting as usual for him. The script doesn't really sing at all. It's like a very vanilla kind of script. So like you get like lesser animation than Unicorn Warriors Eternal or Primal or something like that, and with a worse script. It just, I do think he can do certain comedy very well, and I watched him do it in Hotel Transylvania, but those are very, what works about that is the visuals, and I think there's a few visuals that work, but it's just like too few and far between for somebody who should probably know better. I get that this is a film he really wanted to make, and maybe some people like it. I don't think people getting so disgusted by it is a bit extreme, but I also think like I don't know what he was thinking and what his point was other than I want to show something about me and my friends, which is like, okay, could this not have been a short? Like I think a short wise this would be great. As a feature, it feels like very stretched thin to a point where I don't, there's a whole sequence of the bear at the end that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's just like, it feels like in some ways, like, when you hear about Looney Tunes, they just come up with gags and they run out on gags. And sometimes that can work in a short, but for a movie, and especially this movie, it really doesn't. It just feels like a variety grab bag with no rhyme or reason to it. And like going into like the various sex clubs and all that stuff, I mean, there's certain things towards the beginning where they like explain what happens to you before you get neutered, and like when you see that happening, he's freaking out. I like a lot of the performances and stuff, but it's just like it's very much pushing the gross thing to a point. Like I know Ralph Bakshi did that. I know a lot of bigger animators did that in the 70s, 80s. But like it does feel like, oh, we're going back to that. And maybe like Gendy was like, well, I want to do one of those. It's like that is sort of one of the big animation genres when you look at like Fritz the Cat and most of the Bakshi filmography or even Sausage Party. I'm sure there's a lot of other examples. And maybe he wants to play with it, much like he wanted to do like an action adventure thing with Warriors Eternal or Primal and the Cavemen and stuff. But it just feels like we have auteurs in both animation and live action who will go and play in various genres, but they're saying something or exemplifying it. I don't know if like this is a great sex comedy, honestly. It feels like a pretty basic one that really doesn't even want to say anything about the genre, which I think is like kind of a big issue with it. I know sometimes Gendy Tarkovsky's really good at like exemplifying the genre without like twisting it sometimes, but I feel like with this, like he very much just did the average kind of movie. I mean, like you could make this in live action with some actors and get a similar result and probably cost a lot less and all that. I kind of think this is a idea that's just been floating around so well, someone convinced him it was good at some point, but I'd much rather see him move on to something like much more interesting and visually arresting and stuff. And this is just like not any of that. Like, he really could have done something, I think, interesting and fascinating with this, but it just feels like sort of a lost opportunity for the most part from one of our greatest animation directors. Maybe we expect too much from him, or maybe this movie is giving me too little. I think Fixed was probably the most off and worst Gendy thing that's ever been made, but I have faith in him to evolve from this. I just don't see how anyone thought this movie would go any further than being a Netflix exclusive. Like, it just seems like a really bizarre film to get into theaters, but he managed to make it, and he deserves, I guess, for all the Hotel Transylvania, everything he's done to make a movie the way he wants and like embodies his life and stuff. But I just, like, when looking at it, I wasn't really disgusted or anything. It wasn't really that gross. I think there's too much being made out of it. Again, watch grosser stuff. They watch some John Waters movies, the real ones, not like Hairspray and Beyond don't count. You know what I mean? You got to go like lower than polyester. Like, watch some Pink Flamingos. I don't think it's gross. I just think I'm really kind of disappointed that one of our great animation directors decided to do this, because this honestly feels beneath him and feels beneath me that I'm even that I'm having to sit through this. And I think ultimately you'll question if it's even beneath you as a viewer, because it feels like what is the point of these kind of movies other than to do these gross out sex kind of things? You kind of question everyone's motivation for trying to do this kind of slop. And you kind of like, I don't care if the dog gets his balls or not. I just sort of want this to be over with. It does play like a unnecessarily kind of messy and stupid animated comedy. I wish there was more there. I wish I could say, hey, animated sex comedies are a thing. But I think he just overcompensated. He finally got his way. He finally got to make this movie, and he really like went balls to the wall with it. And I think maybe it would have been better toned down and like having a point to being on this sex comedy, other than he needs to, he's gonna get his balls taken away and stuff. I feel like there's more there that wasn't explored because they had to do all this weird animal sex stuff, which I don't know if was that warranted as a viewer and made that much sense to see. It was pretty gross. This movie really goes for it. I respect it for that, but I think like ultimately you can't really leave this and not be disappointed, because it's like a disappointing idea that this was like his dream project and you heard about all these years is Fixed. Just puts a bad taste in your mouth. So if you've seen Fixed and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.